Welcome to Financial Planning Explained. I'm your host, Mike Menninger, certified financial planner, owner, and founder of Menninger and Associates Financial Planning. I'm pleased to have joining with me Nick DeVito, who is also a certified financial planner, who is also a equity owner of the firm, as well as a lead advisor and a team leader for a group of advisors here at the firm. Nick, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we are on part 3 of a case study. The case study in the first episode, we basically laid out the facts. Okay. The facts were we got a 58-year-old widow with one child, albeit estranged, still working, making about 80 grand, $2 million IRA, $1 million investment account with extraordinarily high embedded capital gains, about $1.5 million in real estate, a couple $100,000 in cash reserves, money market, things like that, $300,000 mortgage. In that segment, we talked a little bit about the first priority is to take a look, financial planning goals and objectives. In the second episode, we continued on with that. And then we also talked about capital gains and the nuances associated with Social Security. Lastly, now we're going to talk about in part 3 is we're going to talk about this IRA that I refer to oftentimes as the potential runaway train. And then in the last segment, what we're going to do is tie it all in together and say, how are we addressing this? So strap on your boots. Let's get rolling. All right. So again, we did the financial planning, clients okay, work because you want to, not because you have to. Okay. Work optional is what you like to use. We talked about the Social Security nuances and what to do and some ideas and some pretty cool things. We talked about capital gains and the capital gain situation that we got. Now it's time to talk about the IRA. So we got a $2 million IRA, all right? She's 58 years old. You figure 75 is when you would have to begin taking RMDs. So that's 17 years, all right? Let's just, for the heck of it, if anybody is familiar with the rule of 72, you take 72 divided by your rate of return, and it tells you how many years it takes for your money to double. So if we were to do an 8% rate of return, 72 divided by 8 is 9, which means it would take 9 years for the money to double in value. Well, in this particular case, we've got 17 years. Round numbers, I'm going to say 18, whatever, is that $2 million would double twice, okay? Meaning that at her age 75, when she needs to begin taking money out from required minimum distributions, we're looking at 4%-ish. 4% of $8 million is $320,000 a year of IRA distributions.
I know who will love that.
Oh, yeah. There are 3 people who absolutely love her. Mr. I.
Mr. R and Mr. S.
Oh, my goodness. IRS absolutely will just be salivating for that. Okay. And God forbid she passes away, assuming and hopefully she reunites with her estranged son, then what would happen is that he would inherit that $8 million. I would be forced to take it out over the span of 10 years. Rule of thumb, if you're earning 7% on your investments, means you need to take 15% out a year. 15% of $8 million is $1.2 million a year. Who are the winners there?
Mr. I, Mr. R, and Mr. S.
Right. And nobody wants to do that. Now, you say, oh, well, we won't have that happen. Let me tell you something. This is human nature. You're in retirement. I need 50 grand. You got your choice. You want to grab it from the taxable account or the one that you don't pay tax, or you pay only on gains, right? I want to take $50,000 out. I'm going to either pay $10,000 in tax or maybe $1,000. That's an easy choice. You're going to grab it from the account that does not sting you with taxes. Therefore, you're leaving that IRA alone, and that IRA is growing. And that is why I call it the runaway train, because once it starts getting to that point where it's $8 million and now you have to take 4% out, trust me when I tell you, you do not want to take more than 4% out.
Yeah. And honestly, to your point about people wanting to stay away from it, I feel like when you say that, sometimes people don't necessarily believe it. Literally last week, I was having a conversation with someone where it was a married couple. One was still working, one was already retired. And they said to me during the meeting, oh, we're just not going to touch that. We don't want to touch it. We don't need it. We're going to use our brokerage account. And I said, no, 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 hold on a second. You don't want to do that because, to your point, you're creating a problem for your future self. While your current self might not feel it, future self is going to be very disappointed with your past self as to not mitigating that in any way. And that's
Right.
really, when we do tax planning, we look decades and generations into the future. We're not just looking at this year and next year. What we ultimately are trying to do when we do tax planning is, how do you and your family, and it's key that I say and your family in there, pay the least amount of taxes as possible, because we look at the tax on the asset, not necessarily the individual. We look at the IRA as a whole and we say, how do we mitigate the taxes on the entire IRA, not just during her lifetime, but also when you're factoring in children. To Mike's point, right now the relationship isn't quite there with her and her son, but if it ever is in the future, or I mean, it doesn't even necessarily have to be her son. If she has siblings or a friend or someone else other than a charity that she wants to be leaving that IRA to, they're going to have to take it out within 10 years unless she were to remarry, but she kind of said she doesn't really foresee herself doing that. So someone is going to pay those taxes on those assets. And what our job is, in conjunction with the client, is how do we pay the least amount of taxes? And sometimes what that entails is paying taxes up front to avoid paying them on the back end.
Right. Now, let's just take a look at another thing. So, leapfrogging $320,000 of IRA distributions. Then we also will have some dividends and capital gains, assuming that the investment account is still cruising along. And then we have Social Security. My goodness, we're talking about $350,000 to $400,000. Guess who else is knocking on the door? We don't like Uncle Sam, but we don't like Uncle Sam's sister either. And Uncle Sam's sister's Aunt Irma. What is IRMAA? IRMAA, which is Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. Basically, it is the surcharge on Medicare based on your income. When you're single, you begin just over $100,000, you begin paying extra costs for that. So I don't care what you call it. You can call it IRMAA if you want, but the fact of the matter is that it's an exchange of money between you and the government. And as long as there's money exchanged between you and the government and it's based on your income, it's a tax.
Yeah.
And so we take that into consideration as well. Now, all of a sudden, if we don't do something to mitigate that IRA now, we've got ourselves a runaway train.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly with IRMAA, that's often a time where you see people's tax brackets change, is once they hit Medicare age, because they're paying that extra money for their Medicare premiums. And what's important to note about IRMAA is there's actually a 2-year look back for it. So even though you're not paying your Medicare premiums until you're age 65, they're actually going to be looking at your age 63 income to determine what your premiums are. And I know on the surface level, people look at that and they say, that does not make sense at all. Why the heck are they looking 2 years back at my income to determine what my premiums are today? When you peel it back a little bit, it makes sense, because the Social Security Administration issues the statements, which is going to have your benefit and your IRMAA. If you're in IRMAA, they issue that typically November or December of the year before the benefit's going to be received. So for example, 2026 Social Security statements were coming out in November or December of 2025. At that point in time, the latest tax return that the government has on file for you is 2024. So if in 2025 they're determining your 2026 premiums, the only tax return they have, or the most recent tax return they have, is going to be 2024. So it's important that when you're planning for IRMAA, you're planning 2 years in advance.
Right.
Now, the caveat I will say to that is, you always have the ability to contest the Medicare premiums, the IRMAA premiums, I should say, as long as you meet one of the qualifying life-changing events. Now, what could that be? That could be reduction in hours. Let's say you switch jobs, reduce your hours at your current job, whatever that may look like. That is one of the options. Stoppage of work. So if you retire or get laid off, that is a reason where you could say, well, it's not fair for you to look at 2 years ago because 2 years ago I was working and now I'm not. Another qualifying event would be if you were married and one of the spouses passed away. That could be a reduction in income and a reason to qualify yourself for the reduction in IRMAA premiums. And lastly, if you had a piece of property that was producing income that you sold or lost or for whatever reason, that would be another reason. So you have some flexibility there, but just the major takeaway when it comes to IRMAA is it's a tax, it's a form of a tax, and you need to be planning 2 years in advance.
Right. And so there's a lot of cool things that you can do, and we'll leave that off and we can have a conversation all just in that. So the long and short of it is that we're taking that into consideration that also 300,000, basically not only getting crucified by IRMAA, but $300,000 for a single individual, driving them up into the 35% tax bracket.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's silly. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, factoring in today, she's in the 22% tax bracket. Honestly, when we're doing tax planning, in the simplest way I can explain it is, what is your tax rate today? What do we think it might be in the future? And in looking at her case, we're saying, okay, we know today you are in the 22% tax bracket. Do we have a crystal ball to know exactly what's going to happen with tax rates between now and her age 75? Absolutely not. But one thing we can say is it's very likely that taxes are lower later than they are today. Just because if you look at historical rates, we're currently in the lowest income tax bracket system we ever have been in, and it's unlikely that it would go even lower from here. So what we're comparing is 22% today to potentially 35% later. Plus you throw IRMAA on top of that, that's another 4 to 5% in taxes there. So we're comparing 22 today to 35 to 40% later. That's a no-brainer in terms of, okay, let's pay 22%.
Right. And to clarify what you actually said it wrong. You said lower tax brackets later, it's higher. And that's what you meant to. Yeah. So anyway, taking all those things into consideration, now we're saying, hey, how do you mitigate it? Okay, well, you could do Roth conversions. Okay, a Roth IRA conversion is basically taking money from an IRA, moving it over to the Roth IRA, and paying the tax on it today. Okay, well, here's an issue. Okay, to your point, I always reference there are 3 basic tax brackets, arguably 4. The 0%. Okay, then you got the low bracket, which is 10 to 12. The medium bracket is 22 to 24. And the high bracket is 32 to 37. We generally will like to try to keep people below, or at least within the medium bracket, which is 24%. And we can reasonably project 24%, you're going to be above that later. So you hit that at roughly $200,000 of taxable income. And if you take into consideration standard deduction, it's basically going to be about $220,000 for a female. For a single individual. So if we've got $80,000 in income already this year, we can only convert 140, right? What's 140 on 2 million is 7%. The account's already up almost 10 year to date, which means even if we did a $140,000 Roth IRA conversion this year, we didn't we just slowed the train down. Because if it grows by 10%, it goes from 2 million to 2.2, and we convert 140, it still went up.
Yeah. And honestly, in her circumstance too, if she were to retire this year, next year, whatever it would be, we look at that as we say, okay, from now until 63, that's our prime opportunity to begin doing the Roth conversions. Because as I mentioned earlier, once age 63 comes around, we now have to concern ourselves with IRMAA, and that's going to change what we do. From now until 63, we can do Roth conversions without having to worry about IRMAA.
Right. So now We're going to pull it all together in the final segment. So stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a few moments.
Do you keep up regularly with your investments? Where exactly are your hard-earned dollars going? Are you financially prepared for an emergency?
I'm Mike Menninger, founder of Menninger & Associates Financial Planning. We believe that education and knowledge are powerful, and we want our clients to understand why we are making the recommendations that we make. It's your money, and you deserve to know where it's going, because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So call us today to discuss your financial concerns. Welcome back to Financial Planning Explained. Now we're going to tie all of these things in together. Okay. So what we have here is a 58-year-old woman who is single, widowed, who we believe can retire. So we look at all the different pieces. Let's put it all together. So at a minimum, what we're recommending is think about the retirement piece. What is it you like to do? What is it you don't like to do? Are there hobbies? And could you simply hang up your cleats? Great. Okay. But for sure, if she decides that she's going to hang up her cleats sometime before age 60, no question about it, we may as well take the free money in the form of a survivor's Social Security benefit. Great. Okay. Now, we still have the two mitigating issues right now that we need to deal with. We've got all these large capital gains lurking out there, okay, as well as the account is extremely aggressive. So we want to pare back on the aggressiveness of the investments, but it comes at a cost in the form of the capital gains, all right? However, at the same time, too, holy cow, we got this IRA out there that is subject to ordinary income tax, and it's a runaway train if we don't do something about it. So now, to understand how capital gains and ordinary income and IRAs work, what happens is that it's like oil and water. Okay. Ordinary income is what sits on the bottom and it has its own set of tax brackets. Sitting on top of it is your capital gains. So the first amount of income is ordinary income. Everything on top are capital gains. So what we're thinking here is two components. Number one, for ordinary income, the top of the 24% tax bracket, which I refer to as the median bracket, is somewhere right around $200,000. So what we do is we kind of back into it and say, what do we identify or anticipate to be itemized deductions, which we get to utilize SALT. Okay, so we back in and say, all right, we can have about a $230,000 adjusted gross income. So now we take a look at, we got $80,000 worth of ordinary income coming from wages, which means we can afford to take $150,000 in doing a Roth IRA conversion. Now, to be clear, a Roth IRA conversion, even though she's prior to age or younger than age 59 and a half, by moving money directly from the IRA to the Roth IRA does not trigger the 10% early withdrawal penalty. So what we can do is we do the Roth IRA conversion. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring her ordinary income right to the top of the 24% tax bracket. From there, we can take long-term capital gains. I said long-term because a short-term capital gain is 1 year or less, counts as ordinary income. Okay. So what we could do is actually, if we brought her ordinary income, her adjusted gross income to $230,000, then what we do is we want to cap it at 505, is because then we don't lose the SALT deduction. So effectively, we can take almost $270,000 in long-term capital gains. So how do we do that? Well, we do the Roth conversion, and then we take the capital gains. Now, what we have a tendency to do is recognizing that there's variability. Okay, there's variability in things that occur. So what we'll do is oftentimes we'll take a big Roth conversion at the beginning of the year, and we'll take some capital gains. But what we do is we wait until the end of the year, until we really have a clear picture of what all income is, at which point then we can take capital gains for more Roth conversions to get us to the numbers that we want. But these are clear conversations you need to have with the client. Why? Because what's going to happen is there's a big tax bill waiting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the tax bill, if you really get down to it, is going to be just on the ordinary income, it's going to be about $40,000. Okay. Mind you, you figure they took about $10,000 out during the course of the year from W-2, which means we got a $30,000 tax. Now you want to throw 18.8% of another $270,000. Now all of a sudden, we've got ourselves roughly a $60,000 tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We need to have these conversations in advance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the part of that conversation too is, okay, well, how exactly are we paying this tax bill? When it comes to Roth conversions, as Mike mentioned, we're doing the Roth conversion, or we're suggesting that she do the Roth conversion. To pay the tax on that conversion, she kind of has three options. One, she could withhold directly from the conversion. The caveat to that is, to Mike's point earlier, the conversion itself, you don't have to be 59.5 to do. You can do that penalty-free prior to 59.5. However, if you withhold taxes from the conversion or from the Roth IRA, that would be considered a distribution from that account, and you need to be 59.5 to qualify for the growth component of it. And then any distributions, even if it's for tax from the IRA, would also be subject to the 59.5 rule. So that is kind of out of the picture. We're not going to recommend that she does something that would get her result in a penalty. Option number two, she could really ramp up her paycheck withholdings, but probably doesn't have enough between the rest of the year, or actually not probably, doesn't have enough from now to the rest of the year. Even if she withheld 100% of her pay to federal taxes, she wouldn't be able to do that. So the last option is using the proceeds from the non-qualified investment account from the capital gains to help cover that tax bill. And that was ultimately what we decided to do.
Well, there's also cash.
Yes. Yep. Cash or the proceeds from the capital gains or from the brokerage cap.
So yeah, we certainly take that into consideration. And, these are very important things to know. But on the soft side, this is always a problem that we have. I say always a problem. This is a problem that we've run into many times before, because now we also take into consideration what's called safe harbor. Safe harbor basically means that the federal government has rules, as well as the state has rules that say, we don't want you to take your $80,000 tax bill and pay us on April 15th. They expect you to be paying it along the way. Okay. Well, what are their rules? Their rules say that you need to get 90% of this year's tax bill into the system before the end of the year, or 110% of last year's into the system before the end of the year, and it needs to be spread out evenly through quarterly estimates, et cetera. Okay. Well, if we look at our tax bill from last year, which is 10 grand, 110% of 10 grand is only 11. This year's tax bill is going to be 80. Okay. Well, $80,000, 90% of 80 is getting 72 into the system. 110% of 10 is getting 11 into the system. What would you rather do? Clearly get 11 into the system. But here's the problem. People tend to forget. Okay. Then all of a sudden they're doing their taxes. They got $11,000 into the system. Now they're doing their taxes. They have an $80,000 tax, which means they have to cough up $69,000 in taxes. Watch how fast someone gets mad. Now, they may get mad at the accountant. Usually the accountant is quick to point the fingers at us and say, dude, it wasn't us. It was those Roth conversions and the capital gains that you took. So it's a trick that we have to run, to get people ready for that. Times, everybody wants to delay the tax to the latest possible point. It's just that when people do it at the beginning of the year and forget about it for 15 months, we've taken giant tax bills, and we've put it into treasuries that mature right before the tax bill would be due. We've done it with CDs, et cetera, et cetera. When you carve money out like that, from an emotional perspective, they know it's carved out for taxes. So those are just some of the soft side of financial planning that you have to take into consideration. The other thing that we have done before is it's an indirect rollover strategy. Call it tricky. Creative. I said sneaky. He always corrects me on the sneaky one. That's basically what we did before is somebody has an $80,000 tax bill we could take and distribute from one of their retirement accounts and then replenish it within 60 days. You can do that once every 365 days. So what that'll do is that'll allow us to defer or delay the payment of the taxes to the last possible moment, which is what we like to do. I'd rather see you earn the money on the money as opposed to the government earning the money on the money, because we know full well they're going to do it very wisely. Okay. So these are all the things that we're pulling together. And trust me, it's a tricky little game that we play, but there's no question in my mind that this strategy that we're putting forth is going to save, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this is going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over her lifetime.
Absolutely.
So, again, it's one of the things that, when I was coaching a very competitive baseball team, my job was to learn and understand the rules for the sake of the tournaments. I've taken that same philosophy and I apply it to financial planning, particularly as it pertains to tax planning. And I always say, he or she who knows the rules the best has an edge in the game. And so is there anything else you want to add? Because I think we can pretty much wrap it up.
No, I think we covered everything.
So anyway, these are all the things that are obviously going through our head. Fan of believing that two heads are better than one. And that's why we have, 5 or 6 CFPs running around this office, because we're always batting ideas around. But I hope you enjoyed it. We tried intentionally talking about a number of different topics and really elaborate and expanded upon it. If any of these potentially apply to you, someone you know, a loved one, or whomever, okay, please just reach out to us. I mean, we love coming up with creative ideas to be able to help you reach your goals and objectives, and certainly in a way to minimize taxes and to maximize tax efficiency. If you wish to reach us, we can be reached at our phone number is 610-422-3773, or you could check us out on our website, which is www.maaplanning.com. And you can always send us a message on the website and we'll be quick to respond to you. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank Nick for joining.
Yeah.
I hope you have a wonderful day and a terrific week. Thank you again.